Hi, this is Linda Shea with Drilling Contractor. Today I'm at the 2024 IADC World Drilling Conference in Madrid, and I have with me Lars Nicolaisen with Rystad Energy, who talked about market outlook at this morning's conference. Lars, thank you for joining me today.
It's great to be here.
So one of the things you said this morning was that you expect the world to need an additional 56 million barrels of oil per day by 2030, even under the base case scenario that you're assuming, and that's new oil. Can you tell us why you said $80 is the oil price you expect is needed in order to deliver those 56 million barrels?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the first thing that I talked about this morning was that we have actually done some revisions to our baseline view of oil demand going forward, and the revisions have been in the direction of an upwards movement. So we basically see that oil demand is a little bit more sticky than what we had originally anticipated. So right now we're estimating about 108, 109 million barrels per day of demand in 2030. When you then subtract the oil that is currently flowing from the current wells, and that will decline to 2030, you're left with this call on new oil of 56 million barrels per day. So that's truly what we need to drill out as an industry, not to necessarily discover, but to drill out, develop new wells. Now, in order to bring online 56 million barrels per day by 2030, that's when we see in our database that we need an oil price of about $80 in order to incentivize the marginal, the last sort of barrel, the 56th barrel, if you will, to come online based on the current cost structure and based on taking into account a cost of capital which is probably higher than what it used to be. In the past, we typically talked about 10% cost of capital for this industry. I made the point this morning that cost of capital is probably higher than 10%.
Another statement you made today was that you expect offshore to capture a larger share of those new oil than it has currently in the current supply chain. So why do you think that is?
It speaks to a rather decent-sized portfolio of offshore projects. Remember, over the past 20, 30 years, we've been doing quite a decent amount of exploration, and so we've built an inventory of projects that has in turn been scrutinized now over a couple of rounds. So it's a pretty cost-efficient portfolio of offshore developments. And pair that with the fact that the opportunity space onshore is a little bit more limited. We're seeing that U.S. unconventionals still has growth potential, but not as much as it had in the past. Conventional onshore deposits are few and far between. And so as such, when you net it all out, there's basically more room for offshore projects to take a bigger share, to your point, than what they are currently having in the current supply mix.
Another really interesting point you made today was that you expect to see a fundamental shift in the way that oil companies procure their drilling rigs. Can you kind of elaborate on what kind of changes you're expecting to see?
Yeah, this is sort of my provocative statement somewhat, right? It's not like we're seeing contours of it already, but it's sort of our argument that this needs to happen. And there's many arguments to this. I'll try to keep it short. In a nutshell, over the past 20 years, I think the oil and gas companies have been blessed with a supply chain that has been flourishing in the sense that capital markets, for example, has been extremely willing to finance the supply chain, the rig owners as an example. We've been building a whole lot of equipment, partly on speculation by the supply chain, and again with opportunistic capital providers as backers to that. That's one example of something that is changing. That is no longer the case. We're not seeing a supply chain that is willing or capable to build equipment on spec. And as such, I think this is a call. There's many other facets to this, but this is maybe it in a nutshell. There's a call for oil companies to work with the supply chain in a somewhat different way. I think we need more intimate relationships between suppliers and purchasers of these types of equipment. And I'm coining it by saying we need more strategic procurement going forward and less transactional procurement like we've had in the past.
Very keen insights and observations. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Lars.
Thank you very much.
And hope to see you again at this conference next year in Amsterdam.
Absolutely. I'd love to be back.
And thank you for joining us on drillingcontractor.org.